Well, good morning, FCC. We're so glad you're here with us. We have a reason to sing and dance this morning, and that's our God and our freedom. With me, chains will fall. Chains will fall. Prison shake at the sound of Jesus' name. Lives made whole. Hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name. Chains will fall. Prison shake at the sound.
Just tuning in, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're going to sing another song together. Come on. I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise
again, like Jeff and Julie have already said, welcome to FCC. We are so grateful that you're spending time with us, whether you're watching with your micro church, which shout out to my micro church, I miss you guys, or you're watching with your family or alone at home or on the road. We are so grateful that you're with us. I want to take just a quick moment to say thank you so much to those of you who give here at FCC. It's your gifts, your generosity that allow us to do what we do right here in our community, in the lives of students, and even what we do globally. And for the last 7 months, we have been meeting remotely. We've been live online. We've gotten some of our programs in person. You know, our high schoolers are in person. Our junior hires are in person. Fuel Men's Ministry is in person. Some women's studies. Rooted's in person. And now just around the corner, something else is going to be in person. But before I talk about that, I just want to say again, thank you. Your gifts allow us to do what we do. And if you would like to schedule a one-time or recurring gift, you can do so right now. You can do so at fcchb.com/give, or you can download the FCCHB app. A planned recurring gift takes less than 1 minute to set up. And if you prefer, you can still mail in a check right here to our campus as well. So thank you. So again, speaking of in-person, starting October 15th, that is this upcoming Thursday, we are going to regather in person here on our campus for our adult gatherings, and we are so excited to do so. Now with that, the first couple weeks, for the first 2 weeks that we meet on that first Thursday and Sunday and the second Thursday and Sunday, we're not going to have children's programs. Part of that is that we care about our kids so much that we want to make sure that we bring absolute excellence to our children's programming for the weekend, including junior high on the weekends. So the first 2 weeks, we're going to have adults only. And currently, we're actually, and if you want to bring your kids can join us as well, but they would be part of our normal protocols that we're going to talk about in just a second. And for the first couple weeks, I mean, we were planning on getting to Orange as soon as we can, but Orange County is still in red, which means we can only have 100 people per venue. So that means we're going to have 100 people in the auditorium. Once that's full, we'll have 100 people in the shed. And once that's full, we'll have 100 people in the commons. But we are so excited to spend this time with you. Now, I'm sure you're asking, well, hey, what does that look like? Hey, can you give me all the details? Hey, I have a question. I knew you would. Thanks for asking. Our team has put together an awesome video with some of the expectations and the protocols that we have put in place to keep you and your family safe and healthy as we begin to regather. Please check this out.
Hey everyone, my name is Julia and I'm on the communications team here at FCC. And I know I speak on behalf of the entire staff when I say that we are so excited to see you in person again soon, and we hope that you are too. But amidst all of this excitement, church is still going to look a little bit different due to some protocol we have set in place to keep you and your loved ones safe and healthy. So I'm here today to show you what church is going to look like when you return. First things first, parking. We are asking that everyone parks in our main parking lot and enters through the driveway off of 17th Street. This allows us to keep track of how many people come in so that we don't go over maximum capacity. The driveway off of Adams will be used as an exit only, so please make sure to enter from 17th Street. Because we have to temperature check and count every person who comes onto campus, we will have volunteers posted at the entrance by the main office, Loma Street and Main Street, redirecting guests to the main parking lot for entry. The first thing you're going to do after you park is head on over to our temperature check station. For all 4 services, this will be located at the main entrance adjacent to the auditorium. If you are someone who usually utilizes our handicap parking spaces next to the main office, don't worry. We have designated 10 new handicap parking spaces right next to the temperature check in the main lot for easier accessibility. This family right here is the perfect example of what to do when you arrive for service. They parked in the main lot, put on their face coverings, and got in our physically distanced line for temperature checks. A quick note about face coverings. Face coverings must be worn at all times while on campus, both indoors and outdoors, and must cover your nose, mouth, and chin. In accordance with CDC standards, valves, gaiters, and handkerchiefs are not permitted. However, we will have extra masks for you upon arrival if you need one. Once you reach the temperature check stand, our volunteers are going to check your temperature and ask you 3 quick wellness assessment questions. Once you've completed the wellness assessment, you'll be good to head on over to the auditorium. If for some reason your temperature is higher than 100.4 when tested, you'll be asked to sit in our waiting area and we'll retest you after 5 minutes. We don't want to have to send you home until we give you a second try. Even though our temperature check process is quick and easy, it will inevitably make the entry process a bit longer. So make sure you arrive about 15 to 20 minutes early to ensure that you don't miss the start of service. Once you enter the auditorium, you'll be greeted by a member of our guest services team who will help direct you to your seat. Because we have to ensure physical distancing between different households, our ushers will be assigning your seats during this time. We understand that you may not be sat where you used to or where you'd prefer, but the most important thing during this time isn't the location of your seat, but rather the simple fact that we get to be together. We thank you in advance for cooperating with these procedures. Once again, we ask that whether you're walking around our campus or inside the auditorium, you must keep your face covering on at all times once on our campus. If the auditorium reaches its limited max capacity, temperature check volunteers will redirect guests over to the shed for overflow seating. If the shed fills up as well, guests will be redirected to the commons, which is in the downstairs area below the auditorium. Once the service is over, communion will be available in the chapel area for those who would like to participate. Those who wish to take communion must exit out the auditorium doors through the lobby or through the nursery area. The other two sets of doors lead back out to the main parking lot and will require you to recheck your temperature as people will have begun lining up for the next service. Let's see, I think I got everything. Enter off of 17th Street, wear an appropriate face covering, get your temperature checked at our main entrance, let an usher take you to your seat, and head on over to our chapel at the end of service if you'd like to participate in our communion experience. Again, I know it's a lot to remember, but our team is here to make it as easy as possible for you. If you do have any questions when you arrive back on campus, you can find anyone wearing this lanyard and they would love to assist you in any way that they can. Again, I am just so excited to be together in community again with you here on our FCC campus. We love you so much and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, for hanging out with us, for inviting us into your home to share this time together. We are in the second week of the series called Indivisible, and we're talking about politics. We're not talking about how you should vote or what positions you should have, but we're trying to figure out how do we live in this politically charged climate. And we're doing that by looking at the life of Jesus. Jesus lived in first century Israel, which was a very politically charged climate. And so we're trying to look at how he lived and how he responded to the reality of the politics around him to kind of try to figure out, hey, how can we as people, how can we specifically as a church, as followers of Jesus, how can we navigate this political division that we are experiencing currently? Now, the first century world that Jesus lived in, he lived in what we know as Israel and the Palestinian territories. And even in the first century, that was a very Jewish place. It was dominated by Jewish ideals, by Jewish culture, by Jewish religion. But ultimately, it was under Roman control. And so in the first century world of Jesus, this is one of the places you see that strong political division is between Rome and between the Jews who live in first century Israel. Because those two people, those two groups, have very different ideas of the way they want society to function. And so you have all these Jewish people who are living in the land, and they want to live according to Jewish laws and Jewish traditions and Jewish customs and Jewish culture, but Rome is ultimately in charge, and Rome has the power and Rome has the authority, and so that creates a lot of tension. And for Jews who are living in first century Israel, everywhere they go, there's always this reminder that Rome is there and Rome is in charge. I want to show you a picture of the temple. This is actually, if you go to Jerusalem now, there's a big model of ancient Jerusalem in the city. That's actually what this is a picture of. It's a picture of this model. But this is what the temple looked like in first century Jerusalem. It's known as Herod's temple because King Herod, who was the king when Jesus was born, he died not long after Jesus was born, but he's the one who kind of rebuilt this temple. And you can see it's a huge structure that dominates the city skyline. And for first century Jews, the temple is the center of faith, tradition, life. It is this symbol that God is with them. They believe that God actually lived in the temple, and so this is where you would go to meet with God. But here's the interesting thing about the temple. Every time Jews went to the temple, they were reminded that Rome was in charge, because if you look right over here, it may be hard to see, but there's this structure that actually sits just a little bit higher than any part of the temple. This is the Antonia Fortress, and it's a Roman fortress, and it's right next to the temple, and it sits a little bit higher than the temple. So even when you're at the temple, if you're a Jew, you have to look up at the Romans. So even when the Jews would go to the temple to worship their God, they always looked up as this reminder, but yeah, Rome is in charge. Rome has all the power. And so during Jesus' life, and even prior to Jesus' life and after Jesus' life, there's kind of this growing tension that exists between Jews and between Romans. And it ultimately boils over in a series of wars. The first Jewish-Roman war starts in the year 66. And I believe that first Jewish war lasts until, I think, 73. But that's kind of the big one. Because in that Jewish-Roman war, Rome actually marches into Jerusalem and they destroy the temple, they burn it to the ground, they level it. And so that war in and of itself is pretty destructive for the Jewish people. But there's other wars and there's other revolts even after that one's over, that in total there's this series of revolts between Jews and Romans that goes from 66 to, I believe, 135. And again, that's where the frustration boils over, and you have these Jews that are trying to revolt, trying to overthrow Rome, trying to establish themselves as this independent nation. Ultimately, it doesn't work. They fail miserably. Their city, their temple, everything gets destroyed. But if you go back to the life of Jesus now, Jesus lives in the early part of the first century. And he lives before all of these wars. So Jesus lives at a time when this tension between Rome and between the Jews, when it's just growing and it's building. And what happens a lot as you look through the life of Jesus, when you read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 books that tell us about the life of Jesus, is you constantly find people and groups of people who keep trying to draw Jesus into these political debates and back him into a corner and force him to take sides in these, Jewish-Roman issues. Where do you stand on this issue? Where do you stand on that issue? They try to pin him in a corner and get him to choose sides. And the way that Jesus responds is absolutely brilliant. We talked about this last week, that what Jesus does is, rather than pick one of the political ideologies of his day, is Jesus does something that's brand new. He presents a whole new way to live. And this is what we want to learn from Jesus. How do we navigate? How do we live? How do we be people of love and of peace in a politically charged climate? Today we're going to look at this interesting story that happens in Mark chapter 12. And Mark 12 is from Mark's account of the life of Jesus. And in Mark 12, Jesus begins by telling this story that's really a critique of a lot of the first century Jewish religious leaders. And so Jesus tells this story, and obviously they don't like it because they feel like, hey, he's talking about us, he's talking bad about us. So they feel the need to respond to Jesus and to respond to his criticism and to respond to this story that he told. So here's what the first century religious leaders do. Mark tells us this, Mark 12:13. Later, that's the Jewish religious leaders, they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus to catch him in his words. And so again, they want to trap him. They want to get him in trouble. They don't like what he's doing. They don't like what he's saying, so they want to catch him. Now, here's what's really interesting about this, is the religious leaders send 2 groups of people. They send Pharisees and Herodians. Okay, Pharisees were first century religious Jewish leaders. They were these people who were experts in Jewish law. Their teachings dominated the synagogues, which were kind of like local churches. And they really wanted people to live a life of strict adherence to Jewish law. Now, here's the important thing about the Pharisees in this story. The Pharisees are very much pro-Jewish, and so they're anti-Roman. Now, on the other hand, you have the Herodians. And the Herodians is a group of wealthy, influential people that got their power from Herod's dynasty. Remember, Herod was the king when Jesus was born, died not long after Jesus. But the Herodians are this group that they got their power, they got their influence from Herod's dynasty. And Herod's dynasty, even during the life of Jesus, there's still parts of Israel that are ruled by Herod's dynasty, so there's still some power and influence there. But Herod ultimately got his power from Rome. The Roman Senate actually appointed Herod as king of the Jews. That's the title they gave to him. And he came back and he ruled, what we know as Israel and the Palestinian territories during his lifetime. And so the Herodians are these people that are loyal to Herod's dynasty, which is ultimately loyal to Rome. So what's fascinating is the religious leaders send these 2 groups of people to Jesus to try to trap him. One is pro-Jewish and one is pro-Roman. So these groups don't even like each other. Pharisees and Herodians don't like each other. But their hatred for Jesus is greater than their dislike for one another. And see, this is what people in the political world, and this is true in every nation, every country, all throughout history, this is what politicians understand, is that hate is a unifying force. Is that it's much easier to bring people together because of their hatred of someone else than it is to unify them around love and around compassion and around justice. And so the religious leaders get these two groups of people that they know don't like each other, but they know their hate for Jesus is stronger than their hatred for one another, and they send them after Jesus because this is brilliant. They send him to try to catch him in his words, and because you have these two opposing groups, one that's pro-Jewish, one that's pro-Roman, there's no way that Jesus can win. He can't, because whatever he says, he's going to make one of these groups angry. And so they've set him up in this trap that's brilliant. He's going to tick somebody off. Now here's what the Herodians and Pharisees do when they get to Jesus. They came to him and they said, "Teacher," talking about Jesus, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are, but you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth." And so they start off with flattery, which is really insincere flattery. They just kind of go up to him and they're kind of kissing up to him, just saying, "Hey, listen, we know how great you are. We know that you're this person of integrity, that you're not swayed by special interests, that you teach the truth of God." Because they don't like him, we know that they're being insincere. But what's funny is what they're saying is also true. Jesus has integrity. He is who he is no matter what the situation is. He doesn't change from one group to another. He doesn't appeal to any special interest groups. He's not out for these people or these people. His loyalty can't be bought. He is teaching the way of God. So as much as their flattery is insincere, it's also very true. So they kiss up to him. They give him all this insincere flattery. And then they get to the question that they came to ask. And here it is, verses 14 through 15. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? This is the question now they're trying to trap Jesus in. This is the political debate they're trying to draw him into. Should we pay the imperial tax to Caesar or shouldn't we? Now, to understand the question that they're asking and what they really mean by this, we have to understand a little bit about geography and how Rome ruled the Jewish people at the time. And so I'm going to put up a map to kind of try to explain to you a little bit of what really is that's going on. This is a map of, again, what we know as Israel and the Palestinian territories. And this is a map during the first century. I don't know if you can see the colors here. I'll try to explain it. The colors are kind of the important part. Now, when Herod is appointed the king of the Jews, which is like 40 years or so before Jesus is born, he kind of rules all of this. He's given all of it. He's the king of the Jews. When Herod dies, though, his kind of united kingdom is divided up among different members of his family. Now, there's some chaos that ensues because of that. And so what happens not too long after Herod dies is that Rome comes in and Rome appoints a governor that directly controls the lower part that's known as Judea. When you talk about the geography of first century Israel, down here in the south, like where Jerusalem is, you have what's known as Judea. Then in the middle, you have Samaria, which is where the Samaritans are from. And then up north, you have this region called Galilee. And Galilee and Judea are both good Jewish regions. Samaria, where the Samaritans lived, Jews didn't like them. But after Herod's death, Rome takes direct control over Judea and Samaria. That's this kind of red, pinkish area down here. And so there was a direct Roman governor that ruled over these regions. Now, Galilee in the north, Galilee is what's known as a client state. What that means is Galilee does have its own king. At this point, it was Herod Antipas, which is one of Herod's family members. So they're a client state. They have their own king. Now, their king is ultimately loyal to Rome, but they don't have a direct Roman governor. And this is why this is important. Down south in this region that's directly controlled by Rome, these people in Judea, so for the Jews in Judea, they had to pay their tax, their toll tax, directly to Rome because they fall directly under Roman leadership. The Jews living in Galilee don't have to pay their tax directly to Rome because they're a part of this client state that's ultimately loyal to Rome, but they're not under like direct Roman control. And so what you had in the south in Judea is you had this debate of, hey, if we're pro-Jewish and we don't like the Romans, is it good for devout Jews to actually pay this tax directly to Rome because you're just giving money to the enemy? So there was this debate among Jews in first century Judea of, hey, should we pay this tax or should we not pay this tax? But Jesus is from Galilee. And in Galilee, you don't pay your tax directly to Rome. So this whole debate over should a Jew pay their taxes to Rome, should they not, doesn't apply to Jesus. He's from Galilee. He doesn't have to worry about that. That's his home. I mean, he's got to pay his own things, but he doesn't pay it directly to Rome. And so what's really interesting about the question they're asking Jesus is they're trying to draw him in to this politically divisive issue that doesn't even apply to him. He doesn't have to worry about it. He doesn't have to do it. But in the South, it's a big deal. And so this is how they're trying to trap him. They're trying to pull him into this debate and get him to pick a side that's either pro-Jewish or pro-Roman, even though it doesn't even apply to him. Because again, all they want to do is trap him. They want to trap him. They want to catch him. That's their goal. So again, go back. Here's the question that they ask him. Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Should we pay or shouldn't we? So they're drawing him into this heated debate that people have very strong ideas of on both sides. Even though it doesn't apply to Jesus, doesn't affect him at all, they're trying to draw him in order to catch him, in order to turn people against him. They want to trap him. That's what they're doing. And so they ask him this question, and they give him really what they believe are the only two options. Should we pay or shouldn't we pay? What is it that we should do here? Now, their assumption is probably, we don't know this for sure, but their assumption is probably that they believe that Jesus will be pro-Jewish. Because he is a Jew, he's from Galilee, he doesn't pay the tax. So their assumption is, well, he's probably going to give the pro-Jewish answer, which would be, don't pay the taxes. And if he gives that, then the answer that he gives, not only is it pro-Jewish, but it's also anti-Roman. And where they ask him this question is in Jerusalem, which is in Judea, the part of Israel at that time that's directly under Roman control. So if Jesus gives an answer that is pro-Jewish, anti-Roman, they can actually get him in trouble with the local authorities. Because the local authorities can say, this guy's a threat because he's advocating, not paying taxes to Rome, not being loyal to Rome, he's being treasonous, he's stirring up revolution, and they can actually get him in trouble and throw him in jail or punish him. So this is what the Pharisees and the Herodians are trying to trap him in. Now again, either way, even if he gives the other answer, there's still going to be people that are angry at him. But if he gives the pro-Jewish, anti-Roman answer, he can get in really big trouble. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to catch him. And so they ask him, okay, answer. Yes or no? It's a yes or no question. Should we pay the tax? Should we not pay the tax? Now here's Jesus' response. It's brilliant. Here's what he says. But Jesus knew their hypocrisy. He knew they're not really trying to resolve this question. They're trying to trick me. They're trying to trap me. They're trying to draw me into this debate, force me to pick a side so they can just light me up. Why are you trying to trap me, he asked. Bring me a denarius, which is a Roman coin, and let me look at it. They brought him the coin, and when he asked them, whose image is this and whose inscription? Caesar's, they replied. So Jesus, smart enough to know what's going on, he looks at him and says, hey, let's just be real. You're not asking me out of a sincerity. You're not wanting to learn. You don't even really want my opinion on this issue, an issue that doesn't even apply to me. You're just trying to trap me. You're trying to trick me. You're trying to back me into a corner so that you can just rip me down and destroy me. And so rather than give them a direct response, he asks them a question. He says, hey, give me a denarius. Give me a coin. Give me some money. And they give him some Roman money. And he holds it up, and he says, whose picture is this? Now, here's a picture I just pulled offline. Here's a picture of a Roman denarius. And what would happen is whatever Caesar was in charge, whatever Caesar ruled, and the Caesars were the Roman emperors, when they minted coins during their rule, during their kind of dynasty, they would put their picture on it. Much like we put pictures of presidents on our money. You take your famous, powerful people and you put them on money. So each of the Roman Caesars would make coins that had their image on it. A lot of times it would say their name around it. And so Jesus takes this coin and he says, whose picture? Whose image is on this coin? And the Herodians and the Pharisees look at him and they go, well, it's Caesar's. I mean, that's what the Caesars do. They put their image on the money. And then here's how Jesus responds. Here's what he says next, verse 17. Give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. And they were amazed at him. So they try to back him into this corner. And they think they've got him. Hey, here's this yes or no question. Give us the answer. And Jesus' response is so amazing that even these people who hate him are blown away. Even these people who hate him walk away going, okay, that was really good. And you have to understand really what Jesus is getting at, because what he says here is actually not as powerful as what he doesn't say. Because there's something that Jesus implies here. There's something that he doesn't say that's so incredibly powerful. Because remember, he takes this coin and he holds it up and he says, whose picture is on this? Whose image is on this coin? They say, well, Caesar's. And Jesus says, give back to Caesar. Give back. The words that Jesus used there, the New Testament's are originally written in Greek. And if you look at it in Greek, the word give back means you're returning something to someone that originally belonged to them. So Jesus says, look, this was always Caesar's. I mean, he made it. That's why he put his picture on it. So when you pay your tax, you're really just giving back to him what was already his anyway. So give to Caesar, give back to Caesar what belongs to him, what's rightfully his, and give to God what rightfully belongs to God. And remember, Jesus is talking to these people who are Jews. And they grew up within the Jewish tradition. They understand Jewish faith. They understand Jewish religion. And so one of the things these people would have been very familiar with is a book that we call Genesis. Genesis is the first book in the Old Testament. And Genesis really is a story about origins. It's a story about where humanity came from, and even it gets more specific and talks about where the nation of Israel came from. And when Jesus says, hey, this coin bears Caesar's image, so give it to him, and you need to give back to God what bears God's image. Well, what is it that bears God's image? And see, in Genesis, we're told in Genesis, when God creates people, when God creates human beings, here's what he says. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image. See, human beings, you and I as people, we are made in the image of God. Genesis talks about us as people being image bearers of God. That we belong to him because he's our creator. When God creates people, literally says that he breathes his life into us. And so this is why what Jesus says, Jesus' response to the Pharisees and Herodians is brilliant, because Jesus says, look, this coin bears Caesar's image, so give it back to him. It was always his anyway. So give to Caesar what bears his image, but give to God what bears his image. So give Caesar your money, but give God your life, because it always belonged to him. It originally belonged to him. He created you. He made you. He breathed his life into you. You are made in his image. You bear his image. See, this is why Jesus' response is so incredibly powerful. Because Jesus says, yeah, being a citizen means paying your taxes, so pay your taxes to Caesar. Give your money to Caesar. But give your life to God. See, Jesus, during his life, Jesus, what he advocated for, and really what the other New Testament writers will advocate for, is even though they live under Roman rule that's kind of hostile to what it is they're trying to do, what they advocate for, really, to the best that we can, is, hey, let's be people who live at peace and seek to bring prosperity to the places that we live, the cities, the counties, the states, the nations that we live in. I mean, that's what Jesus will talk about. That's what Jesus will do. Even when people try to get him to incite rebellion, he doesn't do it. And really, that's when you read the words of Peter and Paul in the New Testament, they'll talk about the same thing. They'll say, hey, give honor to Caesar, even though Caesar doesn't like us. To the best that you can, live as peaceful, responsible citizens within the communities that you live in. Now, remember, Jesus and the apostles ultimately get killed by the Romans. So as much as they advocate like being a peaceful, responsible citizen, their obedience only goes so far. But the point is that Jesus and the apostles, they don't see government as like this evil enemy. And actually, when Paul talks about government is this entity that's ordained by God in order to keep order and peace within any society and in any culture. Now, that doesn't mean that governments always do the God-honoring thing, because they don't a lot of times. A lot of times they are corrupt and they produce injustice. But what Jesus argues is he says, listen, the job of government, the job of authority is to keep peace, is to keep order within any civilization, within any, again, city, state, county, country, whatever they're a government of. And so to the best that we can, Jesus says, hey, let's live as peaceful citizens who are involved, who care, who do our part, who pay our taxes and do the things we're supposed to do as good, responsible citizens as much as we can. But what Jesus says here is, he says, at the same time, remember that your ultimate allegiance and your ultimate authority isn't to the government, it's to God. So go ahead and give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give your life, your trust, your hope, your faith. Put that in God. See, one of the big questions that's raised all throughout the Bible, you go from the beginning to the end, Genesis to Revelation, one of the big questions the Bible raises is, where do we put our ultimate trust? Where do we find security? Where do we find confidence? Where do we find safety? What is it that we put our hope in? This is a question that goes all throughout history at different times and in different places, is what is it that we're trusting? Are we trusting God? Is our hope for our future in God, or is our hope for our future in something else? Is it in our government? Is it in military? Is it in power? Is it in money? Is it in wealth? Is it in influence? Is it in image? Where are we putting our hope? Where are we putting our trust? What are we betting our future on? Again, if you go back to first century Israel and you talk about the faith of the Jewish people, really, I would argue that one of the things the Jewish people put their faith in, like devoutly, was the temple. I'm going to put that picture of the temple back up here. That for first century Jews who were living in Israel during the time of Jesus, that the temple is more than a building. You know, a lot of times when we talk about like a church building, it's like, oh, a church building is significant because that's where we go to worship God, that's where we gather to worship God, and we like church buildings, and we might even consider church buildings, some of us, to be like sacred places. But our view of a church building is nothing like Jews' view of the temple in the first century. That they literally believe there's a room in the central part called the Holy of Holies, that God actually lived there. This was his room. This is God's palace. This is where God reigned. And so this isn't just a building that you go to worship. This is the home of God. This is a symbol that God is with us. For first century Jews, as long as this building is standing, it is evidence that God is with us and God's protecting us. This is why when the temple gets destroyed, it gets destroyed once in the Old Testament. It's devastating. And then again, when the Jews go to war with the Romans in 66, ultimately in the year 70, the Romans destroy it. It's devastating. Because this isn't just a building, this is a symbol of faith. The Jewish people in the first century put a lot of their confidence in this building. You know how we know we're going to win? Because of the temple. You know how we know we're going to be okay? Because the temple's there. You know how we know God is with us? Because the temple's there. And as long as the temple is standing, God is with us, we cannot lose. That's what a powerful symbol the temple is to first century Jews. And even the followers of Jesus believe this. If you go to Luke, you turn over to Luke's account of life of Jesus, Luke 21, at one point Jesus and his closest followers, they're walking by the temple. And here's what his followers say. Luke 21, verse 5. Some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. So even the 12, what we call the apostles, Jesus' inner circle, they're walking by the temple and they're saying, look how awesome this is. Look how powerful this is. This is dedicated to God. This is proof that God is with us. That for a lot of Jews, their confidence, their faith, their trust, their hope is in the temple. It is this symbol that will win and will triumph. It was a sign, it was proof. Now listen to how Jesus responds to their talking about the temple. But Jesus said, as for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down. So they're talking about how great this thing is, that it's this sign of God. And Jesus says, hey, just so you know, there's a time that's coming, and it's coming pretty quick. Because really, about 30 or 40 years after Jesus says this is when the temple gets destroyed. So Jesus is like, hey, just FYI, before too long, this whole thing's going to be destroyed, and there's going to be nothing left. And the apostles are shocked by this, because again, temple's more than a building. And they start asking him, like, give us details. When's this going to happen? And Jesus doesn't give them a timeline. He doesn't tell them when it's going to happen. But he does give them more really bad news. He gives them other things to worry about. He says, listen, you don't need to worry about the destruction of the temple. You got a lot of other things to worry about. Here's what else you need to worry about. He says, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. But before all this, they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and put you in prison. You'll be betrayed even by your parents, brothers and sisters, relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me. This is not like a pick-me-up speech. Like, remember, this whole thing started because they're walking by the temple and they're saying, look how awesome the temple is. Look at how beautiful. This is God's palace. This is where God reigns. This is God's symbol. Jesus says, yeah, it's all going to be destroyed. Then he goes on and says, but you don't need to worry about the destruction. What you need to worry about is there's a time that's coming when there's going to be wars. And there's going to be famines, and there's going to be plagues, and there's going to be death everywhere. And as for you specifically, people are going to betray you. Your own families will betray you. You'll be drugged in front of synagogues. You'll be beaten. You'll be tortured. You'll be persecuted. Some of you will die. Everybody is going to hate you. This is his message. And the 12 are probably going, oh, okay, this is not where I thought this was going. This is not what I saw. But Jesus is getting at, he says, there's this time when everything that gives you security, everything that gives you stability, everything that gives you safety, it's all going to be gone. Your relationships will turn against you. Nations will turn to just everything that gives your life stability is going to be gone. It's going to be chaos. But this is what he says, and this is crazy. Here's how he ends this whole thing. But not a hair of your head will perish. What? You just told me I was going to die. You just told me there was going to be wars. You just told me there was going to be famines. You just told me there was going to be plagues. You just told me these nations are going to fight and conquer each other. You just told me the temple, the symbol of God's presence with us, is going to be torn down. You told me everything that gives me safety in my life, everything that gives me security, everything that gives me comfort, it's all going to be gone. But now you're telling me not a head on my head will perish? How is that? And Jesus' point is this. Even though all this stuff happens, even though there's wars, even though there's chaos, even though there's famine, even though there's disease, even though there's death, here's the thing. Your hope and your trust is not tied to any of those. It's tied to me. So even though all this stuff is going to happen around you, that's not where your safety comes from. That's not where your hope is found. That's not where your security is found. It's found in me. And in the same way that I am going to triumph over death, you will too. So even though all this bad, crazy, chaotic stuff is going to happen, you will be okay because your faith is in me. And in me, we will triumph over all of this, even death. See, this is even what Jesus is trying to say to the Pharisees and the Herodians. He's saying, listen, ultimately, your hope and your confidence and your faith and trust has to be in God. Not in Rome, not in the temple, but in God and in what he's done through Jesus, through his death and resurrection. I want to close just by giving you trying to paint a picture. Okay? So just imagine with me, if you will. This might be kind of uncomfortable, but I just want you to imagine. Let's travel to the future just a few weeks. And imagine that you're sitting at home and you're watching as the election results are coming in. Whether it happens on election night or a few weeks after election night, whenever it happens, the election results are coming in. And it becomes really clear that the candidate that you want to win is going to lose. And not only is your presidential candidate going to lose, but the other party is going to take control of the Senate and the Congress. I mean, it is a sweep. It is a wave from the other side. And not only that, but that party is going to have the most number of justices on the Supreme Court. So when all the dust settles, every branch of our government is controlled by the party that you don't like, the candidate that you don't like. They have their policies and their ideals that you don't like. What are you thinking? And what are you feeling? And what are you wanting to say? And what are you wanting to do? And how does that change your outlook for the future of your life, the lives of your children, the lives of our city, our county, our state? Let me say this, and I think this is really, really important. Election results impact your attitude and outlook to the degree that you put your ultimate trust and hope in them. I'm not saying that elections don't matter. I'm not saying that people in Congress or city council or president, I'm not saying that stuff doesn't matter at all. But what I'm trying to say is what Jesus was trying to say to the Herodians and the Pharisees. And what Jesus was trying to say to his followers as they walked past the temple. That, okay, these things are significant. That Caesar and Caesar's role is significant. That the temple is significant. They're important. But they're not ultimately important. That at the end of the day, our hope and our trust and our faith and our confidence in the future isn't in this political party or that political party or this candidate or that candidate. It's in God. Because if your hope is in a candidate or a party or an agenda, then yeah, when the other side wins, which they inevitably will, if it's not this election, it'll be the next one or the next one, then you will be rocked and you will be shattered and your confidence and trust and safety and security and all of that will be destroyed and you will find yourself in just this really deep, dark, depressing place. But if you place your hope ultimately in God, if you give to Caesar what is Caesar's, vote for Caesar, be a responsible citizen, pay your taxes, do all that stuff. If you give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but you give your life and your hope and your trust to God, then here's the thing. No matter who wins this election, you'll be okay. And I'll be okay, and our kids will be okay. Because our trust, our hope, our confidence, our safety, our security is not in these other things. It's in God who has said, if you put your trust in me, there is not a hair on your head that will perish. Let me pray. Father, I thank you so much for your love for us. I thank you that you came down to this earth and you died and you rose again to overcome sin and death and to provide a new way. And God, I'm so thankful that during your life, God, that you rose above the politics. You rose above the division. You rose above the arguing and the bitterness. And you did that because you always kept focused on your Heavenly Father. It amazes me that when you read through the life of Jesus, that's what he keeps saying. I'm here to do my Father's work. I'm here to do my Father's work. And he keeps submitting and surrendering to his Father because he knew that's ultimately where the hope came from. That's ultimately where the justice came from. That's ultimately where the love and the compassion came from. And God, my hope in the midst of this political season, in the midst of all of this chaos, in the midst of this pandemic, is that we will remember where our hope really lies. Not in this person, not in this party, not in this candidate, not in this agenda, but in God. And what God has done in the person of Jesus. And that we would anchor our safety and our security and hope in that. Because God, if we do that, that's the only way we overcome this chaos. That's the only way we rise above it. That's the only way we know that no matter what happens on election night, that not a hair on our head will perish. Because our trust, our hope, our faith is in you, the creator and the sustainer of the universe. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all in your love, God. I thank you that in you there is freedom from fear, from pain, from anxiety, from depression, Lord. We thank you for your goodness. We thank you that in you there is new life, God. And I thank you that in the midst of all the chaos and the craziness and the darkness in our world, Lord, we can put our hope and our trust in you. We love you and we praise you. In your name we pray. Amen.
Hey, we're going to continue in our service right now, and we're going to keep our promise and answer a few questions. I'm here with Scott, and so these questions came straight from you. The first question, Scott, is a very good one. In our society, why is it assumed that Christianity is tightly aligned with one particular political party?
That is a great question. That's a great question. And I'm going to answer it a little bit, but one thing I would encourage you to do is Stephen and I do a podcast, and it's called Text Messages. And so this month we did two. The one is already released. One will release a little bit later on. We talked a lot about politics, and we talked a lot about this in the one that's out now. So if you go to our app and that, or you can go with like Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, Text Messages is the name of it, and we talk a lot about that there. But I think more than just one political party is we kind of tie faith, Christian faith, to even our nation as a whole. And so we look at the United States as if it's like a new Israel. The Old Testament tells the story of ancient Israel, and Israel is God's nation. And so, the United States, we look at it as, hey, it was founded on by Christians and a religious liberty. And so we look at it as like, hey, we're somehow God's special nation above all these other nations. And so because of that, we tend to tie God's blessing to whatever our personal preference is.
Absolutely.
And so historically, you probably have more Christians that would align, with the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. But again, we talked a little bit about this last week. But I think it's more than just that party. It's that we have this feeling that, hey, we're God's special nation. And we talk about this in the podcast, but we have to be careful to do that. Like, I love this country that we live in. I think it's a great country. I think it's the best country on the planet. But we're not like God's special nation. Like our president, our government is not the same as Israel's king and the way Israel, like God was supposed to be the king of Israel. And so we have to be careful to not just say like, oh, we're the new Israel because Israel ended. That's why we call the Old Testament, because Jesus replaced it with something new. And so there is no new nation that functions as a new Israel.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. I mean, there is that longer form answer on the podcast that allows you to get into that.
We talk about it a lot more. Check it out.
It's a great conversation. All right, Scott, second question. What are practical ways to put your trust in God?
That's another great question. And what I would say is you have to do things that create space in your life for God to actually move. I tell my kids all the time, like, hey, nothing changes if nothing changes. Like, you want to make changes in your life, but if you just keep doing the same old thing, nothing will change. And so you have to do something in your life that actually creates space for God. And so what I mean by that is like, one of the big ways our faith grows is actually through generosity. And so a lot of times I tell people, like some people are like, I want to wait till I feel like I should be generous. No. Be generous first and then see what God does in that. So like I would say, if you don't give, start giving or push your giving a little bit, because then by pushing your generosity, you're giving more away, which means you're living on less. And so within that gap, you've created space for then God to do something. Because I believe God honors our generosity. I don't believe he's necessarily going to pay us back. Like, hey, I gave away $1,000 and then I won $2,000. But whether it's joy, whatever it is, fullness. So by giving or even volunteering, like, hey, when I start serving, when I start giving, when I start telling people about Jesus, when you take those steps out of your comfort zone, you've created a space for then God to do something in your life so that your faith can grow. So you have to do something that's uncomfortable. You have to stretch yourself in order to give God that space to work in your life.
I love that. Yeah, the giving of our resources, whether it be time or money, is a great way to show how much we trust. That's wonderful. All right, last question. Will there still be church online next week?
That is another great question. And the answer is yes. We're still going to continue to do church online. So even if you can't make it here, or you don't want to make it here for whatever reason, that is totally, totally cool. We're going to continue to do church, and you can continue to be involved in the ways that you have been. You can still text in questions. You can text in questions whether you're here in our auditorium or whether you're at home. We are going to continue to do our best. Even all the way through this pandemic and even beyond this pandemic, we understand that, hey, there's a lot of people that can engage online because you're traveling or you're gone or for some reason you're home or you're sick. And so that's going to continue to be a big part of the way we help people engage with what's happening at FCC. So by all means, we're going to continue to do it at the same level of excellence that we have been and hope that you'll join and continue to be a part of it.
Absolutely. We're even going to double down with our online host and all those different environments so we can be active with you in perpetuity as we go forward, as we continue to do this. Thank you so much for being with us again this weekend. Just one more thing before we take off here. Again, we are so excited to continue in this series. And as we head into the last week, the third week of Indivisible, the great news is some of us are going to be in person together starting on Thursday. That's Thursdays at 6 and 7:30, and then Sundays at 9 and 11. So starting next week, those new service times, Thursdays at 6 and 7:30, Sundays at 9 and 11, and we are just so very excited to be spending that time together. If you need more information, you can go to fccHB.com/COVID-19, where you can learn a little more about what everything is going to look like and those safety protocols. In just a moment, a slide is going to show up that's going to have the rest of the information. But again, we can't wait to pick up with you starting Thursday and Sunday, whether you're watching with your microchurch in a backyard, you're right here in person with us, or you're watching online. We are so grateful that you're part of our community, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye, everybody.